Hello, I'm Frank, host of Reader's Labyrinth. I'd like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Doing so really helps me out. Allow me to introduce L.B. Stimson. She's an author, researcher, and expert in the field of paranormal investigations. I had the pleasure of buying, reading, and leaving a 5-star review of her haunted house story, As the Moon Fell, on Amazon. You'll find a link in the show notes with my review. L.B. Stimson is a frightfully compelling and poetic author. Her descriptive language sets a solid atmosphere and does what I expect all my favorite authors to do, make me forget my troubles for at least a few minutes. I'd recommend clicking the links to her Amazon page and starting with As the Moon Fell, and then eventually you can work up to her excellent Gothic horror tale, A Pale Shade of Winter, book 1 in a series set in New Orleans during the Spanish-American War. For this chat, LB sat down with me to discuss her own paranormal experiences, faith, and belief in the spirit world. What I took from this conversation is a realization that our physical material world may not be all that there is. Reality might, at its highest levels, be non-material, and that reality could be leaving clues for us to find in the dark shadows of our world. You can find links to L.B. Stimson's website and works below in the show notes. I invite you to help validate your favorite author's labors and buy L.B. Stimson a copy of her book and leave her a review on Amazon. It really doesn't cost that much, and you'll be super, super happy that you did. And now, let's get on with it and sit down with L.B. Stimson. So, L.B. Stimson, welcome to Reader's Labyrinth.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this interview, and I've been looking forward to it because I recently read your work, As the Moon Fell, and I found it to be a really, really cool haunted house story. And I thought it had really solid character, a great plot, but what I really love about it is the descriptive language that you use in it. And we're going to get to it. I have a list of questions for you, though. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, I can't wait. So the first question I have for you is, your website says that you majored in cultural anthropology. And I find that very interesting because I majored in history. Can you tell us what cultural anthropology covers and why you chose it?
I'm not sure why I chose it. Growing up in Idaho, I had an interest in the Nez Perce culture. I had an interest in the way the Wild West, because how can you not? And cultural anthropology kind of struck me as, maybe Indiana Jones-esque type, adventures outside of a small town. And so that's why I chose it, because I thought there's a whole wide world out there and peoples and cultures. I had a pen pal that lived in Trinidad, and that's when you wrote letters and back and forth. And it was fascinating to, see pictures of her life on an island, so tropical island, so different from, where I was growing up. And I thought, to study the cultures, the traditions, the religion, just all those little things that makes a culture tick fascinated me. And I thought that would be the best thing to do. Maybe I could travel the world, going from culture to culture, take pictures, see myself in National Geographic, something like that. That was just kind of stuck with me as something I wanted to do. In hindsight, I probably wouldn't have majored in cultural anthropology, but that was, the mid 80s, and that's what I wanted to do.
I can tell you this, if I had it to do over again, I probably would have never have gone to college, and I probably never would have assumed the cost of it. And instead, I probably would have, tried to get like an IT certification or something like that, because I know where I work, the people making all the big bucks is in the IT field. So I think, for me personally, if I could go back, it would definitely be in a field like that. And so I find your interest in the study of cultures to be to be something pretty cool. So what is it about other cultures that you like? Is it different systems of thought? Is it just how they perceive the world that's a little bit different from us?
I think it's a little bit of both of that. I think when you come across someone that has a different way of living, a different mindset, you learn a lot about that person, and you learn how to interact with me, whether it's a small group of people or, if you're Secretary of State or, a diplomat, you learn how to, work your way through those cultures, maybe find common ground when there isn't. I think that's one of the things I'm most interested in is the differences. Why do you think that way when I think this way? Was it the way we were raised? Was it the environment? As in, you grow up in, California, or you grow up, in New York or Canada, or, different things that you have to adjust to live. When I moved to the East Coast, I had people say, Idaho, wow, like it was from another planet. So even, from state to state, there's cultural differences and ways of life. And I just think it's one thing that connects all humans together and separates us at the same time.
So just looking at a map, it seems like you must have had some pretty harsh winters here. With me living in South Carolina, if it gets below freezing, then we consider that, just a blizzard. What were the winters like up there in Idaho? Were they particularly brutal, or?
Yeah, I was in north central Idaho, and, we never had a snow day. When I was old enough to drive a car, if you wanted to drive to school, you better shovel it out yourself.
Wow.
We've had snow in the wintertime. We've had, snow, by Thanksgiving. You went to school with your boots and your gloves and your jackets, and you didn't think anything about it because that was just the way things were. So, beautiful summers. I know it seems to be getting a little warmer there in some areas, but, beautiful summers and then a long winter. But, my sister lives up a little further in the mountains there, and they'll get, several feet of snow. So she gets a lot more snow now than we ever got. But we don't get here in Virginia. It's a little different. Snow causes chaos, and
out
for west, sure. You learn to live with it, and it's no big deal. You just drive on the snow and get to where you're going. But out here in Virginia, it's, it would be like if it snowed in South Carolina, I guess.
Well, we're talking about other cultures and practices, and I think one big influence of a culture is its geography. And I know that before we started recording, we were talking about Frank Herbert a little bit, but a big theme in his books, especially his Dune books, is how the ecology and geography shapes human culture itself. And I think a lot of aspects of the cultural South is because it's so freaking humid and hot down here. And that really affects, it really affected the way the people on a social basis will interact with one another. Because, air conditioning, it wasn't really widespread in the South until the 1960s. But I thought it's kind of cool, your interest in cultures and how geography can kind of play a role in that. And speaking of that, kind of moving on to our next question. You grew up, as you put it, in a one-light town in Idaho. Any small-town folk myths or urban legends that you're aware of? I know some of our little small towns across America have some nestled under some rocks.
The most thing we had was just stories of Bigfoot. I had a math teacher who would, in high school, and he would always tell his Bigfoot stories because he would work the fire lookouts in the mountains in the summertime, which a lot of people did. And
that is ripe for a good story. Oh my gosh!
So
you're on a fire lookout. You're way above the trees. You see it in the. That is just ripe for it. Yeah.
He would always tell us his story about the screaming and the weird noises and the banging and everything, and we were always captivated by that. If you fly over the Rockies, over Idaho, and you just look down and you see that vast wilderness, you wonder is there something out there, and why haven't we caught it on, a hunter's, camera or something like that? But then we're still, finding things in the ocean we didn't know existed. So it was, Bigfoot was the big thing. I think, I could look into the foothills from my house growing up. Yeah. And you wondered, what were those noises and things? Usually it was coyotes, but now they have a lot of wolves running around.
That's scary. If I was up there in a fire watch station knowing there were wolves down there. Well, now, just speaking of animals that we didn't know existed at one time, the Department of Natural Resources for Michigan for decades said that there were no mountain lions in the state. And people were saying, no, I saw one. I saw a tail behind a tree. I saw a shoulder, the shoulder blades of a mountain lion. I saw it lope through. So they eventually hired this guy from a university, right, to go up, in Michigan and prove that there were no mountain lions, which, for the record, any kind of government conspiratorial group, I am for sale. If you pay me, a couple $1,000s, I will come up with proof that something does not exist. I can get you a negative, okay? But he eventually went up there and he found all this kind of stuff, but for decades they were denying it. But anyway, that's just kind of a funny little aside to it. No, that's kind of neat.
That is neat because here in Virginia, I live basically a stone's throw from the Shenandoah National Park.
Oh, wow. And,
yeah. People have said there are cougars out here, mountain lions, cougars, however you want to call them. And they keep denying it, but people have seen pictures. People have said they're here. You may not, and they're lone animals anyway, but they're here. I believe that they are here as well. So
that's awesome.
You just got to be careful when you're walking through the woods.
And, and especially for a writer like you, you're seated in your house. You grew up in Idaho, surrounded by wild wilderness, stories of Bigfoot in your small town, just little off the wall stuff. And then you have the valley right there. So that's pretty cool. I really like that. And speaking of that, I'm sure that you've been taking a lot of pictures. I bet there's a lot of stuff that you can capture on camera, because I noticed that photography, and this is our next question, factored very heavily in your work as the moon fell. Your main character was a photographer, and several scenes involved descriptions of film development to create atmosphere, which I thought was super, super cool. Whenever I saw what you were doing with that, I was like, I'm definitely leaving 5 stars on this. So I'm curious, where does your love of photography come from, and how did you get into it?
My love of photography started back as far as I can remember. I was probably 3rd or 4th grade, and I had one of those little square Instamatic cameras.
Oh yeah.
The flashes would pop up and you'd pull them off, old technology. But I always had a camera. And it was just something, it was like an obsession for me and a hobby. And I just always had a camera with me. I don't even know where that came from. No one else in my family, they had no interest in it. They was like, why are you buying, all these magazines on photography? Why are you spending hours setting up a shot? Why are you taking pictures of, this when that's not interesting? And I always loved it. And when I taught photography for a short period of time, and I told my students, because I wanted to teach them how to critically think, but use photography as a tool. And I said, get down on your hands and knees, stand up, stand on your head if you have to, but look at the world differently while you're taking these pictures, because you'll see things, and you'll see things that are cropped out to change the narrative. And I said, never let anyone tell you what you're taking a picture of is not interesting. If it interests you, then there's something there. And I've just always kept up with that. I've, trying different things. I tend to, when I'm doing more fine art photography, go dark on my contrasts. I don't know why. That's just my thing. Or strange angles and things. But I've just, I saved when I was 13, 14. I was 14 for my first camera. And that's when you had to mail order out of New York City. It took, I think, 2 months to finally get to Idaho. But I still have that camera. And I incorporated that camera into As the Moon Fell Down as my photographer's camera.
When she was developing her films in the cellar, right? And she was hanging them up. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty neat. So I have a question for you then about that. Why do you need a red light to develop film? Like, is that just something in the movies, or I've always
it cuts. It's actually, I haven't done that for so long. I couldn't even pull up the technical term, but it's not going to, affect the chemicals or the lighting or anything. It's kind of a neutral. It's a neutral.
Okay. Yeah.
What do I want? I can't even think of the terms now because everything's digital.
It isn't going to dye it or leach it or anything, I imagine.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay.
And so that's why you're in the room in the dark without any additional things to affect every bit of the process. But yeah, that's been a long time. So I'm going to probably bail and go back to digital on that.
So you discovered that you wanted to be a photographer when you were 13, I guess, is whenever the interest, I guess, kind of manifested itself. When did you discover that you wanted to try your hand at writing?
I've always been good at writing. People would tell me, you should write a book, you should do this, you should do that. And when I started my professional career outside of anthropology in college, I was working as an editorial assistant and just, fact checking and things like that. And then I moved into the graphic design and then doing some more things like that. But I always just enjoyed writing. And several years ago, I had a bad accident and I injured my back. And so I was stewing on the couch in anger and pain. And I thought, I got to make a change here. And I thought about this story my husband and I had chatted about. And I thought, I'm going to write that story. And I just took out my notebook and, handwritten, that's what I did. My first book, was written in a notebook because I thought I love this. I didn't have a clue as what I was writing. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't doing structures or chapter plot summaries. I was just having fun and writing the story. And I realized I have a certain way I write, and it all fell into Gothic horror in that poetic prose. And it just came naturally. I thought, well, here's where I need to be, my second career choice.
Well, I am eternally thankful that you decided to make that career choice. I kind of wish that the precipitating event hadn't been an accident and you getting hurt. But for me personally, as a reader, I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of the stuff that I've read so far. So tell me about your interest in history. What is it about the past that you find fascinating? And what's your research methodology like for your novels?
What I find fascinating about history is it's awe-inspiring. It's the world is bigger than you. When you walk, say I live in the northern Shenandoah Valley, so I'm surrounded by battlefields, Civil War battlefields, some, colonial history, but a lot of Civil War battlefields. I can look out my house at right where there was a battle. I mean, plucking right there. And it's bigger than you, the world, life, everything. To me, it's kind of like an adrenaline rush in a way, walking where other people walked and trying to imagine them and their struggles and how much the world has changed since then. And so when I do write, and I like to be historically accurate as much as possible, but I'll take author liberties. But I'll look at maps. My father was a land surveyor, so I was always around maps, and I love reading maps. I love looking at maps, atlases, and I will study them completely. So I know the distances, how long it took to travel by car or horseback or wagon, where they were going, what the roads were like back then. I'll study, websites with history on clothing, women's clothing, men's clothing, the type of weaponry that was available, technology, the age of Reconstruction, and then moving into, the 1910s, 1920s, and just the industrial age and everything. All of that just fascinates me. And so I try to at least have a snippet of an idea of what I'm writing about. I'll go through recipe books. What did they eat? What did they drink? What was, how much did this cost? I try to at least have a good idea of everything. I may not include all of the facts, but I like to have a good general sense of idea, because that way I can walk where my characters are walking, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I've always been fascinated with the field my entire life. And, I really like what you said about that sense of awe whenever you study the past. and just the massive humanity that have gone before us. And they have tales of adventure, sorrow, strife that is anything as impressive that you would get in like Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's and especially like the lesser known aspects of history, like you're talking about, just reading a recipe book and just diving into that primary research and just getting it right off of the bone. Just give me history, straight off of the bone. That's how I want it. Just in its unfiltered form, original sources, even if I can't understand the language, and being able to kind of use these facts to reconstruct the past. It's really, really powerful and cool. So, yeah. So
I mean, I know we might touch on this later, but one example of how awe-inspiring it is, I'm researching a book, and I found a letter written to a woman shortly after Gettysburg. And she was trying to find another woman's son who had been injured at Gettysburg, brought to Winchester, Virginia. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about where he might be? The lady was writing, this woman I'm writing a book about. And I thought, wow, here's his name. I found his name through records. I went to the cemetery where they had, the lady had started, and then they had interred a lot of the Confederate dead that were just laying across the fields, and I found his grave. And I found this soldier's grave with his name carved in it, walking through, stone after stone after stone. And I thought, I wonder if that lady ever got a response that her friend's son was buried. Yes, indeed, they found his body and they buried him, or not. Because here I am 160 some years later, standing right there. And that was, to me, it was like touching the history, touching the past. It was a big day. It was just cool. And I thought, I'll never know if, correspondence, it's amazing I even had the letter in the first place, and that letter had survived. But and based off of the letter, you were able to locate where that fallen soldier was buried. That's really, really incredible. And, it was like a mini obsession, I guess. That's a prime example of history becoming alive for us. I really, really like that. So, man, that is almost a ghost story in and of itself. And speaking of ghost story and haunted house stories, what makes a good ghost or haunted house story to you? I would say for me, it's got to be atmospheric. I need the atmosphere. I agree 100% with that. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, definitely. The chills, the bump in the night, the creaking doors. I don't like gory haunted house stories. To me, it doesn't appeal to me. That, I prefer to have, and sometimes, and I like that. I don't mind if the ghost is vengeful or not. I like the ghost to have a personality, whatever that may be. With a ghost, there's usually some sort of tragedy that's fallen them. But I need authentic ghosts. I don't like ghosts that turn into monsters and then they grow tentacles and their eyes glow and stuff. Those to me are not, I like spiritual ghosts. That retain their human personality, and because they're still got their personalities. And I like those types of ghosts, not the ones that, turn into monsters or crawl across the ceiling. Those, to me, it's not it might be a demonic haunted house, but when I say haunted house, I mean ghosts. I mean, there's somebody, walking up and down, sitting on your bed, watching you sleep, still inhabiting the house. There's definitely a very creepy factor when an author is building an atmosphere to a haunted house story. And it seems like the more the anthropocentric the ghost is, the more creepy they are. Like the more human-like they are, and the more you can kind of have some empathy for them, then the more scary the ghost is. At least in my opinion. Anyway, no, and that's true. I mean, I had a paranormal investigator tell me once, remember, they were people. So if they were, loving and kind in life, they'll probably still have that same personality. But if they were jerks or angry or this and that, well, in death, they might still have that same personality.
Oh man, that's a scary thought. If someone was a punk in life and then they die and they have like the same, oh no. So speaking of authors and building atmosphere, who are your favorite living authors today?
Well, up until she passed recently, I really came to admire Anne Rice.
Oh yes, yes. Yeah.
Her body of work and the intricate details of her writing. It's just it's amazing. It just amazes me. But one of my favorite current authors that I've gotten to know is Shani Struthers.
Okay.
And she writes supernatural bent books with ghosts, some of them with ghosts, some of them not with, but she's very authentic in treating the interaction with the spirits and what it takes to go in as a medium or a psychic or a sensitive and interact with the spirit and to connect with them and hopefully move them on to the light. But I love her stories. And she has a great haunted house book that got me started on her. And I've been blessed to get to know her over the internet. And recently, speaking of history, Stephanie Dre.
Okay.
And I just got done with 2 of her books, and which inspired me to go with a friend to Monticello recently, or not Monticello, Montpelier.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And to walk where all these characters she wrote about were, and it just brought on a whole new experience for me. And I really like her attention to detail and her research. It's phenomenal. And so those are 2 of my favorite authors right now that I think I will read more of Stephanie Dre.
I want to say I've seen them on Twitter too, I think. I've seen at least one of them on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, on there. So, kind of moving on, I'd like to shift gears a little bit, if it's okay with you, LB.
Sure.
And I would kind of like to talk about your philosophical worldview. And to and to lead us off into this direction, do you believe in the paranormal, and do you think it's capable of interacting with humans?
Yeah, I believe there's paranormal, which is something you experience that's not normal to what your current human existence or maybe your worldview or everything. And there's supernatural. To me, supernatural takes on more of a spiritual tone, beyond nature. If you believe in a higher being, a God or what, to me, that would be more supernatural. Paranormal to me would be more like, okay, I walked in the room and I know there's no way my cabinets are open and the chairs are tipped over. That's not normal. That's paranormal. And I believe that, yes, those that have crossed the realm or entities or energy that's on that paranormal side can shift and interact with people. I believe that most humans have the ability to sense that, but they tune it out over time, whether through age or philosophy or, study, religious studies or whatever. And I believe that those on the other side can go about doing their business and not sense, the living. I think sometimes the worlds collide and some of us are more sensitive to it than others.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so you brought up some terms, I believe, in entity and something else you used to describe it. My brain just drew a blank. I'm so sorry. But I think the next question will kind of shed some light further on this. How would you define a ghost?
I would define a ghost as a disembodied spirit of a human being. Do I believe that the animals have souls and energy that goes on? Yeah, I do. So I know there's plenty of reports of people who have seen people with their animals. They've interacted with their animals. So I guess any living creature on the earth. I guess you could say warm-blooded. I'm going to say warm-blooded. That'll probably get me in trouble versus a snake or an alligator. But I think the ghost is the disembodied spirit of the person, the energy of that person still, has enough energy to, whether it's a full body apparition. Most people equate ghost with full body apparition versus an orb or a mist or something like that. But it's still that spirit energy.
So when we use terms like spirit energy and we use terms like something is left over, so I'm trying to think about what some schools of philosophy have kind of categorized the human being as having. So we have a body, and obviously at death, that body's going to decay and not be able to hold this immaterial side of our existence. And so what do you think a person's spirit is? Is it our will, our intellect, and our emotions that we just kind of put into one bag that we call a spirit? Or is a spirit almost like, a shadow of ourselves in another dimension, I guess, or another plane of reality? And
I guess that's a deep question. I would like to think that everything's got energy. So where does that energy go when a living creature dies? I believe we all have a soul, and I believe that soul is called home. I say I'm Christian. I believe there's heaven. I believe your soul will go, should go. I also believe that spirit energy can still cling and manifest itself in its form, or, because it has unfinished business and it's not going to go yet. So it is going to exist within that realm between the living and heaven, beyond the veil. It's going to linger and go back and forth until its business is done, or it's, it's ready to go for whatever reason. That's, for whatever reason, it's still clinging to existence. But I think that's kind of where I'm at on that, if that makes any sense.
it makes perfect sense. And what you're doing is you're articulating what a whole bunch of really smart people believe. And it's like, food powers the human body, and that material food is consumed by the body, that if we do have spirits and souls, it's turned to an immaterial form. So if regular food can do that, then maybe out of necessity, that means that there really is like a residual like battery left over or something like that. And of course, I don't have like a double blind, this experiment that I can prove it or something, but it's just kind of food for thought. And I got like a real, I guess, positive idea of that out of your book As the Moon Fell, which spoiler alert, the ghost of the little girl, which is not really a spoiler because I'm not going to tell them everything, right? Full text available, no. But when she would pass through a wall or when she was interacting with the physical plane, I was just asking myself, I'm like, is this the girl, her will, her intellect? Is this her emotions? Or is this kind of like, reality just has these multiple dimensions? And I don't know, some of those questions were just kind of going through my mind. So, which is yet another reason the viewers need to go and buy the book. I thought was really, really cool, especially the atmosphere. But, so I heard you mention and describe yourself as a sensitive. Can you please explain what this is and how you came to this conclusion? Also, how does this influence your stories?
Sure. A lot of people have different definitions of sensitive. I don't go to the psychic medium realm. I think they are on a different plane level. I think a sensitive to me and what I do, I can sense spirits. I can see them. On occasion, I can talk to them. On occasion, they just come through with images and messages. But it's not something I actively go out and pursue. I think because it's very draining. It is very draining on the emotions and your own energy. But that's basically what it is. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you hear them, sometimes you feel them. I think, it's a little higher level than you thought you saw something or you thought you felt something. It just, I think it's a natural gift in a way. Once in a while I'll have a premonition about something, not very often. I don't walk into a room and, touch things and see things going on like a psychic medium would, but I can feel the energy. I can see them once in a while when they want to make themselves known or if they have a message to give. So that's kind of where I'm at with what I consider being sensitive. And the second question, I think I forgot. When did I know?
Let's see. The second part of it is, how does you being a sensitive influence your stories or your writing, or does it? I guess
it does. I try to bring in the way I feel if it's an unknown spirit or an unknown energy to my characters who are like, oh my, what on earth is going on here? Did I just see this? Did I just experience this? And when as the moon fell down, that was all based on my unplanned private tour of the house on the battlefield. And then I thought, there's a story there. I need to write a story there. And that affected the way my main character saw the female ghost. And I created the female ghost as an intelligent haunting. She had thoughts, feelings, emotions. She could interact versus residual energy that's just kind of going through a cycle and around and around. And, it's just kind of stuck in this perpetual loop, but there's not an intelligent being attached to the energy.
So stories that feature a ghost, which great answer too, by the way. I really like that. But ghost stories that feature the entity is stuck in this eternal loop. I'll tell you why those stories always kind of set very, very uneasy with me, is because I'm not sure if you're aware of simulation theory, but it's the idea, for our viewers who haven't heard this before, but the idea that our reality is actually a simulation being generated by like a higher power, either an alien intelligence, and there's different little theories of this, gods, human beings from the future, or whatever. But they say that one of the telltale signs that we're living in a simulated universe is the existence of paranormal entities, because it's almost like a glitch in the matrix. Hey, there's a part of the program, the code isn't quite right here, and there's a repeating process like you would see in a video game that has some glitches in it. So whenever I read the haunted house stories where they're dealing with these entities that are almost like an algorithm, like that's how it reacts to a human being. It's like it's intelligent, but the lights are out. And it doesn't have to have like a general level of intelligence to be a possible threat to us. But your book, I thought, kind of carried a good balance, between the ghost could kind of perceive people around her. And she also kind of felt like, those broken heartstrings that she once felt when she was alive around her. And I thought that you pulled that off really well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It was a great book. So, kind of delving a little bit deeper into L.B. Stimson's worldview. I read on your website in your bio that you had an encounter with the Queen of Heaven herself, the Blessed Virgin Mary. Can you tell us about that? And while we're on it, what are your religious beliefs?
Sure. My encounter with Mary was very strange for me because I'd never given Mary a lot of thought. I grew up basically in I call it generic Christian family, and so we were having some disturbances in our new house up on the mountain, my husband and our two children. And I finally sat down one day and said, we need to figure this out. I'm going to my next door neighbors who are Catholic, very devout Catholic couple. And I went in and sat down. I said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I think my house is haunted. And they were like, no, and gave me a bunch of books to read, gave me a Bible. And
did they give you a rosary? How
no, they
devout
did
were these
not.
Catholics? They did not give you a rosary.
They did not give me a rosary because I was coming to them with an disbelief. This like, I'm agnostic. This
I
is not
understand.
me.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't, and they gave me a Bible and it was in plastic, and I just took everything with me. And then I started seeing visions of Mary in pictures in the woods. I lived on at the end of a gravel road in the woods. And I started seeing, and I remember running to a coworker of mine and said, look at this picture. Look at this paper. Do you see her? And she said, what are you talking about? I said, why am I seeing Mary? I've got this shadow figure in our house I can't get rid of. Stuff is moving, stuff is disappearing. We're fighting over the electricity not working. And I finally sat down and I cracked open that Bible. And I read for hours. I was like, I'm reading words that I had shunned years ago that didn't make sense to me, growing up, going to college, doing, whatever. And I thought, this is the answer to my shadow problem, the dark entity in this house. And seeing her, I think what I came to believe, and we'll move into my religious views, I converted to Catholicism. And it was a battle of the wills, but I believe that Jesus sent his mother to me to get me to see what was going on, to bring me back around to where I needed to be. It was I always say I tangled with the devil to find my conversion to Christ. And when I started writing a story about it, but then it got really, really personal, and I was like, I'm not going to do this. But I had to go through all of that. And so I come at the Catholic faith differently than a cradle-born Catholic. I'm the only Catholic in my family. My mother, God bless her, passed away a few years ago. When I told her I'm getting baptized and I'm going to become Catholic, oh gosh, I wish it was you were going to be a Baptist. And I was like, because she grew up in a family that did not have a positive opinion on the Catholic faith. And I said, well, this clicks for me. Everything clicks for me. I'm not having to change my worldview. I'm realizing it's been there. I'm just seeing it in a different light. So when I write, I had someone tell me, you shouldn't be writing these types of ghost stories because that'll get you kicked out. It's like, I'm writing what I'm writing. I don't bring my religion. I don't bring my religion into my books like that. I'm just writing what I'm writing. And I'm not I know there's a whole litany of rules about, spirit interaction and this and that and this and that. And there's a fine line everybody walks, if, Catholics or not, when it comes to that. But that's the way Mary came about. Cause I was like, I've never really given this lady any thought in my entire life.
Well, Ave Maria. How about that song?
Definitely.
Well, I can certainly tell you, I'm a convert to Catholicism myself from Lutheranism.
Okay.
And, I think we kind of see the religion a little bit different, but, I can kind of catch, some of that. But I'm curious if that book is ever going to see the light of day that you were attempting to write, but things got a little bit personal. Isn't that amazing? How a true,
amazing.
Authentic experience gets so personal like that.
I often thought that it would be better as a public speaking thing. And I'm an introvert by nature, but when I need to public speak or do something, I can get myself in the zone. I may crash for a few days afterwards to rebuild my energy, but I often thought that might be a good thing for public speaking for people, that if you're experiencing whatever you're experiencing, don't be afraid to go ask, for help. I was at my wit's end. I thought, we just built this beautiful new home. Nobody's ever lived there. We've got this shadow figure moving around the house and this entity and wreaking havoc on our home. After I converted and got baptized, it went away, which was, thank goodness. But I think we bring a different perspective to it. That's I'm not quite sure what else to say about that, but the book might happen one day. But it's one of those real personal, how much do you want to put out there?
I can totally follow. Understand exactly what you're saying. And I think the way we kind of ended that question is going to lead to our next question pretty good. Because it seems to me like you've had paranormal experiences firsthand, both professionally and personally. More than one time, more than two times, probably multiple times is kind of what I'm getting from you. So on that note, do you think the Catholic Church's teachings on the spirit realm and life after death hold up based on what you've witnessed?
I do. There's a line in a rosary book I have that death is a transformation, a gift given to us by God. And that's kind of where I think your energy transfers over. There's more than just the physical body. I think it does. I just generally believe that it does. I mean, I know that the waters get a little muddy when it comes to, interacting with the spirits or talking to them or reaching out to them and doing that. But for the most part, I mean, I wouldn't, yes, I believe that it
Awesome.
fits just fine.
So we have already established multiple paranormal experiences for you, and one of which was an entity that you believed was demonic. What do you have to say about some of the Christian believers out there who believe that any non-material entity that appears in front of them, whether it's ghosts, spirits of loved ones, or apparitions, that they all demonic? Because I've kind of heard that before. Any kind of contact with the spirit realm is a probability that it's demonic is off the charts, or you probably 100% are interacting with a demon who's attempting to deceive you.
I think when you interact with, say, a loved one who's passed away and they want to bring you a message of comfort, you can sense the energy. It's like walking into a room and you feel the good energy, the bad energy, if there'd been a fight or, everybody's all tensed up, or you can sense that now and so I would disagree with people on that. I think, do demons exist? Demonic energies exist? Sure, but they were never human. Can they transform themselves to trick people into something? Sure. But I also think that it's not a bad thing if you have an interaction with someone when your mother comes to you and says, I was sick, it was time to go, I'm fine. To give you closure and give you that. And when they come back and check up on you, I mean, that's a good thing. It should be a comforting thing for people. And so there's definitely people who dabble in dark magic or that maybe are dabbling in drugs or things like that. They vibrate at a lower level. There's more negative energy there. And so I would think if you're dabbling or in negative things, not, building up yourself to be whatever, to your potential, you're going to draw in more of the negative energy. Will you draw in a demonic? It's hard to say. I don't think that they're just running around the world, but there's enough good and bad in the world, evil in the world. I think you kind of got to take it case by case, person by person, if that makes any sense.
It makes total rational sense, especially just taking it case by case, person by person, because I've seen some folks on the exact opposite of the spectrum, and they'll say, well, all spirits are good. 100% of them are good. And then, some of the, other folks, and they're like, no, they're all bad. But I think like most things in cultures and history and life itself, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Some are good, some are bad. So I've heard you mention that, you can help souls move on. And so I was just wondering, how and why do souls become lost after death? And if this is the case, how can our actions in this life help them?
I think basically it's a lot of prayer. Mm-hmm. I watched someone move a spirit on once, and the energy in the room was heightened, but the room was quiet. And it was just a lot of prayer and encouragement to, your time is done here. The family's moved on, so you need to move on. That's basically what it is. It's praying for that soul to move on, and I would pray to God. I have prayed to God to get this one particular soul to move on. It was time. It was time for it to go. There's nothing here for you now. It's just, please go, please go, please go. And it took a couple of years of praying, just because you don't know why someone's clinging on and not moving on. But I think the biggest thing that most people do is, you imagine bright light, warm light, loving light, and send as much love as you can through your energy focused on the soul you're praying for. Basically, that's how it works, or that's how I do it. Everyone's a little different.
So I kind of wonder if this ties in at all with the Catholic doctrine of purgatory. And what are your thoughts on purgatory? And does this factor at all in your writing? Like, is there a story somewhere where a soul would come from purgatory and ask for alms or amass an intention? And I know that you said earlier that you try not to drop your religion into the stories itself, but I know that in the Catholic world, there's some apocryphal stories that are floating around like that.
I haven't brought anybody in from purgatory. I stay away from purgatory a little bit. You're moving on or you're stuck. And I knew someone who had just suffered a loss, and somebody had mentioned to the poor mother, they'll be in purgatory for a while. And I was like, don't say that. Please don't say that to a grieving, parent. I always was, so I just thought that always struck me. And I was like, no, I don't touch purgatory. You're either moving on or you're not.
Understood. And I can certainly respect that. I think that purgatory is kind of scary, isn't it?
Well, it is
like
scary.
A place of purification, purifying that silver.
Yeah.
Getting it ready for the beatific vision.
Yeah. And that's the one. Yeah. It's, I'll leave that one alone, I guess.
Perfectly understandable. So I would like to shift gears again. We've gone from second gear. Now we're moving into third gear. We're starting to go up the mountain now.
Okay.
And I'd like to talk about your paranormal experiences. Now, we've kind of hit on some of them, but can you tell me about your very first experience with the paranormal? What was the experience like, and how old were you?
One of my first memories is the house I grew up in. The second house, when we moved to Idaho, and I was 8 years old, and beautiful home, beautiful neighborhood. But there was a room off the carport that you could get to from the back. It was separated off the house. There was a dining room and then a door leading to the carport and everything. There was a room back there, and we called it the spare room. That room had an energy in it like no tomorrow. It was never clean. It could never be kept clean. It was cold. It was freezing. There was always like this presence just pushing you out. And nobody ever wanted to go in there. We would tease each other to go in there when I was with friends and things, because we would say there's something in there. Well, 20 some years later, my dad was visiting me in Virginia, and I said, tell me about the spare room. Because I was like, you never went in there. I never saw you go in there once in the 20 years, 15 years we lived there.
That is creepy. Yeah.
And he said the first night we moved in, there was banging and just sounded like someone broke into the house. And he said, I grabbed my gun off the shelf and ran down through the house. Didn't want to wake you guys up. Got to the door going to the spare room, and it was going on. He said, I flung the door open. The room was quiet. He said, it went on for a few nights. And he said, your mother and I heard it. We never said anything to you. I was like, well, I knew something was going on in that room because you never went in it. I mean, you would avoid it like the plague. And so that room was just that. What do? You learn to live with it. You didn't have to go in it for anything. there was a freezer in there and whatever, but it wasn't a part of the daily living. And I did ask a friend if the new people that moved into it, because I knew them from childhood, and they're like, they haven't ever experienced anything. They opened the room up and put in a bigger window and made it, part of like a laundry area or something. So they were using it. But that room is always stuck with me. It was like you ran. If you had to go through the carport into the dining area, you ran.
You ran as fast as you could.
And the door was always kept closed. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I wonder if I can sense a little bit of that as the moon fell, because it seems like, there was a forbidden part of the house. There's definitely that cold, kind of nasty presence there. So it's really amazing how these experiences will come out in your writing. Yeah, I think that's pretty neat. So speaking of paranormal experiences, I'm not sure if you're familiar at all with the works of Jeff Kripal by chance.
No, I was going to look him up, and I did not get to that.
I need to send you one of his books. I have stacks of his books. I can give you a little bit of background about him. So, which he is going to be on Reader's Labyrinth in a week or so, actually. Okay. I'll be having him on. So he has his PhD in philosophy and religious thought. And he is currently a professor at Rice University. And he has written a ton of books about the paranormal, or as he would call it, the supernatural. 2 words, right? 2 of the words. And he has conducted primary research, if I had to sum up, which is impossible. I mean, he has so many, his whole work is an intricate web of, I guess, today's intellectual attempting to understand high strangeness and how it affects human beings. But he's conducted a ton of primary research into the paranormal, and he has come up with some commonalities and correlations. And those are, a child that is moving from childhood into adolescence, any kind of abuse or violent trauma. He says that based on his research, these will often act as conduits of the paranormal or the supernatural. And I guess with you being a good Catholic, the preternatural in a minority of cases. So I was just curious, because you are a researcher. It seems like you have some professional background in the, in the arena of the paranormal. What are your thoughts on this? Does trauma, abuse, does someone moving into adolescence, I know there's a poltergeist connection. Mm-hmm. Have you found that to be the case in your experience? And just what are your thoughts on this?
I haven't, like with the poltergeist, I find that a fascinating phenomena where they usually say it's a person's energy creating some sort of external energy force that can do things. I'm not sure about that. I think that if you're going through trauma, then you might be more opened up to negative energy that can manifest itself. Because I think negative energy is always looking for that little tiny crack in the seal to go through. They're just waiting for somebody that's just down enough and their energy's down enough that they can just break through. And I think that if you keep some sort of positiveness around you, we all like to be around positive people, that provides you a barrier, your aura, whatever, how people want to say, you've got a good aura about yourself. I'm not sure I'm going to have to look into his, research. There's might be a connection more so with the poltergeist. Did we have a poltergeist in the house I grew up in? I don't know. We had just moved in, so there wasn't any time for us to have energy built up in the house. We had just, literally that night we had moved, so was it left over? Was there trauma in with the previous family there? Was it just and stuck in that room? I don't know. It was there, it would calm down once in a while, but it was always there. So I'm not sure about that. Wish I had a better answer, but I'm not sure. If I don't know, I'll say I don't.
That's okay. Oh no. Never underestimate the answer that you just gave me. I thought was really good. So I understand that you are currently conducting some research in something called the Philip Williams House. I believe that's it. What can you tell us about that? What first attracted you to this? How did you find out about this? Where did this come from?
The Philip Williams House, I first started actually working for the previous owner. He had a restaurant and they needed some marketing assistance, and they were trying to just revamp the business side of the restaurants. And so I needed a job, and got the job and started working there. And my interest was, I had never been there. The owner, he was Catholic, and he would say, "Hey, it's haunted," kind of joking with me. And I was like, okay. Oh, it is haunted. Okay. And then
Was
I was
this
like,
before or after your conversion, I guess?
after.
Okay.
After
Right.
my conversion. So like I said, he and I walked a fine line on my interaction with the spirits and the Catholic Church teaching, because he allowed me to bring in a paranormal research team.
Oh, okay.
And that was fascinating. The interactions we had, the electronic voice phenomena recordings we got. And that's when I started delving into the family. The house was known, and it is a factual fact, that Colonel Patton, who was injured September 19th, 1864 at the Third Battle of Winchester, his cousin was Philip Williams. When he was injured at the Third Battle, which was probably as the crow flies, a couple miles only, but brought to the house where he lingered and died. And he's known as the soldier in the window, the Confederate in the window. And so I really started looking up more into the history of this family, because after getting pushed down the stairs in my excitement of running through the house, taking pictures and disturbing what didn't want to be bothered, literally, and they didn't save the CCTV tape, which really irritated me because I was after them for, literally looked like an invisible linebacker, picked me up and I went face planted down the stairs. I didn't break anything, thank goodness. I thought, I woke up and did I break my teeth or whatever? And I've captured on film a dark, shadowy billowing entity. Because when I take pictures like that, they're consecutive. Because I want to compare, less than, millisecond by millisecond. And I had a dark shadow coming up from that morning. And then I would hear things. And then I saw the lady of the house walking by. And I thought, wow, this place is authentic. This place, there wasn't I don't think there's anything malevolent in that house. I think I probably irritated something that wanted to be left alone, because it was 3 stories and then a basement that was dark and dreary and nobody wanted to go down there. Found out it had served as the morgue, because that house was a Civil War hospital during the battle. So just all the stuff that went on in the house. I started researching the family, the true history of the family, and just became more and more fascinated by them. When I've done everything, I've been to their family plot. Mary, the matriarch of the family, she's the one that started the Stonewall Cemetery in Winchester to gather the dead. She started the Ladies' Memorial movement to gather the Confederate dead. And that movement started all across the South. And she's buried there with her family, her parents, her husband, her children. It's heartbreaking, some of the stories, the letters I read lots and lots of letters written that survived the family. They're housed at the library and the archives across the street, because it was a prominent family. So I could probably go on and on for hours about the Williams family and the house, but I'll stop here to get in another question.
Well, I love these deeply authentic experiences of the paranormal, like you were just telling us. So I have to ask, what did it feel like to be picked up by the entity?
It was, how people say that if they're having an accident, it's like slow motion, everything slows down. Yeah. That's how it was. I was going down the stairs and I just kind of felt like my feet were pulled backwards. And I'm holding on to the railings and the banisters. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to fall down these stairs. And I was about 6-7 feet up, and they're just a little carpet runner on old wooden stairs. And I'm holding on, and I'm like, just start tipping. I'm like, I'm going down. And somehow I didn't even feel it. I didn't feel going down the stairs. All of a sudden I was at the bottom of the stairs and just kind of dazed, laying there like, what had just happened? I had a scrape on my shin, and I mean, nothing. I didn't have no bumps, nothing. It was almost like I went down in slow motion, but I didn't feel anything.
That's incredible. Wow.
And so I don't know if there was it was taking me down. It gave me a little shove just to say, hey, don't bother me.
Giving you a nice little warning shove.
Yeah, don't bother me. I don't know. But that was the only physical thing like that happened to me. Like, boom, you're going.
Man, that is super, super cool. So that sounds like something that I would see if I was watching Ghost Hunters. Speaking of which, speaking of Ghost Hunters, season 14, episode 9, is that correct? The
yes.
Wraith
the
House?
Wraiths of Winchester.
That's right, the Wraiths of Winchester. So I understand that you had a guest appearance on that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the current owner, after the restaurant shut down, the house sat still and went into bankruptcy. And thankfully, the new owner snapped it up and renovated it and brought it back to life, fixed all the structural problems. And I think someone from his staff had reached out, or he had reached out, because when I met him at the auction, I said, take care of her. You're going to have, he's like, is it haunted? And I said, you have no idea. He thought I was a bit of a nut. He called me about a week or two later and said, you want to come up? Because things were already going on. The renovations were starting. He was seeing stuff, hearing stuff. And so they brought in, I don't know all the details behind getting ghost hunters in there. I know they go through their whatever list they go through, but because I had done an extensive research on the house and the family, and I had my experiences there, they brought me in to be a paranormal witness, and used a lot of my research, which I was glad when they were looking through, the house and the family and everything. There was so much more that didn't get told. I mean, I got my 45 seconds of fame, I guess, after, a 3.5 hour on-camera interview and a couple of more off-camera interviews. I mean, they really did a thorough research job, but, the spirits aren't going to respond just because you snapped your fingers and said, hey, I'm here and I'm filming.
Exactly, yeah.
So there was a lot they didn't get, but I have my own personal experiences there. I almost feel protective of the place in a strange way, because I've gotten to know the family so much just through reading their letters. And so it was great. I loved it. I loved being on it. It was a rare thing, but I was pleased. And the owner decided to step away kind of from the ghost hunting angle. The house is up for sale at the moment. It's
I
an
imagine
event.
so, if he's trying to sell it.
Yeah, it didn't work. And so I talk about the Philip Williams house because that's the historic home and the family, but I don't talk about the venue because that's kind of, it's gone a different way.
I can understand. Yeah, definitely.
But, the spirits are there. They've been there for a long time. They're going to be there long after us. I think there's some that are just intelligent and they're clinging, and there's a lot of residual energy in the house as well. But, it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
So have you ever captured anything on camera, like a photograph or anything, or?
I've gotten some pictures I believe are faces from the farmhouse. And the farmhouse is the other book I wrote about the crumbling. Technically, I think it's back here. You might be able to see it. Anyway, it's a farmhouse. It's an 1830s house. It sits on some acreage just north of me. It's crumbling down. The windows are now broken out. The ceiling's falling in. And before the windows were blown out with this recent windstorm we had, I think it was in the spring, I stood at the side of the road because got a cattle guard and it's private property. And with my long zoom lens, took pictures, got home, was like, whatever, I'll just go through these later. And I'm like, I got a guy with his hand on the pane, and you can see his eyes and his face and his hand on the window pane.
Are you sure it wasn't a real person?
No, it wasn't, because in the back, well, unless they have hollows for eyes, but in the background, my husband's like, don't you see those faces?
Wow.
And I was so focused on this man, I didn't see the other faces. So I've got that. I've got orbs that I took in a dark room at Jordan Springs, which is another haunted location in Virginia. And I know it's been on some of the ghost hunting programs. I just took a shot through a dark room. I wasn't supposed to be upstairs. We were at an event, and I climbed over the rope and ran up the stairs just because I wanted to see if I could find anything, and took some shots. And when I got home, I'm like, I got lights, orbs of lights going through the room, which I loved seeing. I have a video that my niece sent me that I've never shared publicly. It was after my mom died. And the dog in her attic was spinning around weirdly. And my niece went back and looked at her camera video, and you can see a white draping figure going around the dog, up and around, and a couple of orbs of light, and then it just kind of shoots up. And we're like, was that Mom? Because she liked the dog.
Yeah.
She just passed away, and it was in her attic.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like to think that, well, mom was just, saying, hey,
petting
she likes the dog, she likes the pets.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's like you said, the attachments to personal things, and kind of seeing that. So why do you think that you can take a picture of like a room where you don't see anything, but when you develop the film or when you download the picture, you can see orbs and stuff in it?
I think it has to do with nowadays, or even back, with film camera. It's just the way the lighting captures the energy, and our eye is not true. We just can't see it. We can't see that energy. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can see a spirit manifest itself. I saw full-bodied apparitions at the Philip Williams house.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, to the point once where I thought my coworker had walked by me, and I was like, I didn't hear anything. In an old house, you hear everything, It's like, and I turned, and then she went by me around into the desk area. Then she turned and she went back around, and I was like, what am I seeing? Oh my goodness. So I think it just depends on the energy level that the spirit has, that the equipment can pick it up. I mean, I don't know. It's like, the Victorian photography, spirit photography, some of that was hoaxy, and people were, ripping people off with that. But I don't know this. I don't have a good answer for that. Some people will explain
that's
the
a good
way.
answer. Yeah. I mean, because, whenever we talk about the paranormal, at the beating heart of it is a mystery. There's so much stuff that just doesn't make sense, I guess, in our plane of existence. But one thing that we can make sense of is your writing. We have that right in front of us. So we were mentioning the terms Gothic horror. Can you tell us, what is Gothic horror?
Sure. I mean, Gothic horror is a subgenre of horror. It's a style of writing that started back in the late 1700s. It's a style of writing that usually has the setting is key as a character. Usually think of a crumbling castle, or a abandoned mansion, or someplace dark and foreboding. There's usually a family, a generations of secrets, or a curse, something. I'm losing my train of thought. I wanted to see something about it. Always has a supernatural element, but it's whether real or imagined. So not every Gothic horror story is going to have a ghost. and not every ghost story is Gothic horror. So there's always kind of a separation there. But sometimes you'll have the lady in distress, the damsel in distress. You've got the dark villain. You've got a mystery to unsolve. And it's written, most Gothic horror, I think is written very detailed. It's very detailed oriented because the author is bringing you into the scenes. So you can feel it, and it's more atmospheric horror and psychological horror than it is blood and guts horror. That's kind of like the way I describe Gothic horror. I always tell people, well, and when they look at me, I'm like, well, think Dracula, but I don't write vampires. Oh, okay, I got it. The creepy castle and the monsters and this and that.
It seems like vampire, horror stories have really kind of gotten away from the Gothic horror, and especially the supernatural elements to it. I mean, I'm just trying to think of some of the recent movies that have come out, and the vampires are basically a person with a virus. I mean, that's all they are. And it seems like more and more in the field of horror writing, well, no, I take it back, not so much with authors who are writing books, but if you look at the TV shows that are coming out, it seems like they're trying to take the paranormal out of, what goes bump in the night. Well, is this easily, this sequence of cells, or it's a different genome or something like that. And so, the zombies are a virus. The vampires are just a virus. Hey, they're just like you and me. And they're really taking the otherness away from it and the atmosphere and sense of metaphysical mystery out of the old monsters. Even the werewolf genre. I mean, they're turning them into, just a hybrid thing, or someone that just has a werewolf gene in them. And I mean, it's like, they've taken the gypsy palm reading evil magic out of it. And I kind of think a lot of the writer's imagination in Hollywood is suffering because of it. I
haven't bought into the it's a virus thing yet. I know. Yeah. I prefer my old school vampires.
Same here. Yeah. Which, if Anne Rice is one of your favorite late authors, then I think she was kind of the first one to kind of take us in that Twilight direction, I think, because I know in book one of Interview with a Vampire, they would sleep in coffins, but then I think in the Vampire Lestat, they quit sleeping in coffins, and they were just kind of, which she is such a great writer. I mean, I'm not going to criticize it. She did it so damn well, and she pulled it off so good. I think a lot of other lesser writers tried to imitate that, and instead, what we had was the laboratory vampire. That's what we ended up with, this Terminator machine. But
yeah,
we could go down a rabbit hole, I think, or I could,
definitely,
yeah, for sure. So what is it about New Orleans culture, history, and ambiance that makes it such an attractive option for a certain author I'm talking to write a great story?
I think I've only been to New Orleans once, long before digital cameras. And I think it's just the fantasy idea of the atmosphere of New Orleans, the history of it, the Bourbon Street and the French Quarter and you can go and just let loose, it's someplace, there's a place for everybody in that idea of old New Orleans. You can go to disappear, the bayou, the swamps, just the whole atmosphere, the homes, the homes are gorgeous. If you go through the Garden District, the old homes, everything about New Orleans reeks of old Southern I don't even know what to say. Just everyone's idea of what place to get away, place where you can hide. It's wet, it's dark, there's lots of smells and food and frenzies. It's a feeding frenzy, whether you're a vampire, I guess, or you're just, running around doing things. But there's a mystery to it that it's like unlike any other place. I mean, there's, it's New Orleans. It's, it's been, the ports, just the changes that have taken place over the years. But And the cultural changes, the people, it's like everybody could go there and just do with their, their thing. I don't know, maybe that doesn't make sense. When I think of New Orleans, to me, it's that key location. It's sultry, it's sensual, it's hot, it's humid. You can hear the birds, the crickets, you can smell the flowers, and, the horses clocking on the stones. And I don't know, it's just the perfect place. That probably sounds silly, but
no. And the city itself, it almost seems like it belongs in another time period or another civilization itself. And I'm thinking of the Byzantine Empire in the Levant. I'm thinking of Britain before the Romans came. It has like a primordial feel to it. And Joseph Conrad in Heart of Darkness, he wrote about wild places on the earth that kind of exist at the edge of civilization, and beyond that are like our primitive tribal ancestors. And for the folks who've never been, it's kind of hard to describe, but you really get a sense that you're stepping into another world. A perfect place for a Gothic horror for sure.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of a romantic idea. I mean, I'm looking at that small little area of New Orleans. I'm not looking at, modern day proper outside New Orleans, but you can kind of just take that little section there of the Garden District and the French Quarter and old world,
especially
quarters of New Orleans.
French Quarter, yeah.
Yeah, and
definitely,
carve it out and make it in, as a little time capsule. And I think that's what most people think of, and when they think of New Orleans. And I think that's why it is a great setting for a book. Your monsters or your ghosts or whomever can exist there without being disturbed.
Awesome. You've kind of given me an itch to see it again. I saw it years and years ago. So the next story I'm going to be reading is going to be your novel, A Pale Shade of Winter. What can I expect in this novel?
A Pale Shade of Winter was started out as a short story challenge, and I was trying to think of something interesting to write, and I thought, I'm going to write about a couple of grifters, and that would be very different for me. Well, it turned out I ended up back where my roots are with my writing. It ended up being historical Gothic horror with a young woman, pregnant, out of wedlock. Her husband's already dead, running off, to figure out, getting sent off to the convent to have her baby. So the family name wasn't, tarnished, and her father's wealthy. So you're going to get that whole sort of that cultural theme of honor and duty and social rules and society. And then you're also going to get the angle of one character mostly, hell-bent on revenge, because their lives were taken away, because they were, and they find out their entire life was a lie. All the lies the family told to save the honor. And then you're going to get the supernatural aspect of it. And it's a supernatural, I call it a ghost story of sorts, because for what the brother does for the sister, because he can't let her go.
Isn't that what the real super reality is? It's kind of paranormal, and it's not, and you have to look twice, but when you look twice, it's gone. And
so you're going to get a love story that sometimes borders on impropriety between the brother and sister, because he's so consumed in his love for her, but he's so consumed in his anger towards their mother, that it destroys them in a way. And you're also going to get what I try to do with my stories. I try to bring a little bit of light in at the end, because so you're going to get a little bit of that too. All is not dark and dreary in this one, but it is set in New Orleans. It ends up in New Orleans, but it's as close to a tortured love story I could write between a mother and her children.
If an author wants to write authentically, me as a reader, I've always found that the darker the story gets, I've always kind of asked myself, I'm like, okay, has the author taken me like beyond the event horizon of the black hole? Are we past the point of no return? Is there not going to be any light at the end of the tunnel? Because a lot of these postmodern writers will write stuff just like that. Okay, everyone dies in the very end. It's like the ending of the German movie Das Boot, when the submarine finally goes back to port and all the airplanes come and they bomb and they kill everyone. So I have read novels where we just cross over the event horizon and we never return from. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, other than the fact that, do you think that writing can deal with human themes that are so dark that there is no finding the light? And is there a correlation with that to reality? Do you think that human beings can be irredeemable because they've gotten so far down a dark path?
I think, well, in Gothic especially family Gothic, you deal with a lot of dark family secrets, and some authors make the characters redeemable and some authors don't. I think not everyone is redeemable. I think there's some people that are just pure evil and there is no redeeming them. That's kind of, so in writing, we have the flexibility to let our villains be villains, or, let our villains find their way back, find forgiveness, this or that. I mean, it's up to somebody if they want to forgive somebody, which is a great thing if you can forgive somebody. But I think there are some people, that are not redeemable, and
I totally share that.
Criminal element. I'm going to go there, and I'll leave it there.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of crimes that are completely irredeemable that I could probably think of. Well, thank you so much, LB Stimson. I've really, really, really enjoyed you coming on here and chatting with me tonight. And before I let you go, before I hit the stop recording button, is there anything you would like to ask me, or anything you would like to leave our viewers before we close this out?
I would just like to thank you for this time and for your in-depth research and the questions and the thoughtfulness behind it. I don't think I've ever done, I don't do a lot of interviews. I like to stay in my little closet area, but this was great. And I would just say that I would encourage any author watching to reach out to you.
Do you guys hear it? You heard it from her.
I would say this was a great experience. Very easy. We chatted before the interview started, made sure everything was good. And I would just say, you're doing a great job. And I really appreciate just the time you took to get to know me ahead of time and to read my works. And I would, I'm happy to come back and talk more ghosts, or talk more writing, research, if you want to have me back. But this was great. I just want to thank you very much for this. And just keep doing this. I think it's a nice setup and it's not scary.
I'm going to leave those words in the minds of our viewers. Thank you very much, LB.
All right. Thank you.